Welcome to the ANSERS Institute webinar series on response to intervention. The Alice Neely Special Education Research and Service Institute is part of the College of Education at Texas Christian University. The ANSERS Institute strives to provide high-quality professional development for teachers and school leaders. This webinar, supported by the Morris Foundation of Fort Worth, is meant to further your professional development. We hope you enjoy it. The topic of this webinar is Response to Intervention Using Technology within an RtI Model. The webinar features Dr. Barbara Freeman, President and Chief Operating Officer of Digital Directions International.
Thank you. And I'm glad I have a picture up with this really big smile because that really was a very nice introduction. So today the focus of this webinar is how the thoughtful integration of technology in RtI can help unlock the potential of students. And what I'd really like you to come away with is, one, that this webinar is focused particularly on Tier 2. And secondly, a few points where technology can really help a teacher become effective, because it is fairly overwhelming to implement RtI and to implement it well. And technology can really help by integrating assessment and instruction, by delivering consistent, motivational, and evidence-based instruction, and really by the use of data. You can monitor progress, and you can use reports and use data to drive instruction. And I think that if there's a theme in all this, this is what I would like everyone to come away with. As Lindy said in the introduction, we have, this is a 5-part series, and we were honored in part 1 to have Dr. Stephen Kuchik speak to us. And the pyramid that you have up here right now is the pyramid that we all know very, very well. Well, what he introduced us to, he turned that pyramid on its head. And he had us, and I encourage you, by the way, to have a look. We have recorded his webinar, so I encourage you to have a look at his webinar and hear this in more detail. But he has asked us to look at it in a slightly different way, once again, by turning it on its head and looking that most kids will benefit from somewhat intensive instruction. Again, what we're looking at is in between, at that some children need more support. When Stephen spoke to us, he spoke to us really about a circle of intervention, about thinking not just about the pyramid, but thinking about it in a truly holistic way. So we're thinking about curriculum and interventions and instruction, assessment, as well as behavior, culture, leadership, and professional development. What I'm speaking to you today about is more what's going on inside, less so positive behaviors, more so the other 3 parts of the inside of that circle. But it's really important that we're talking about this in a wider context, so this is where I wanted to begin. So again, my focus is on Tier 2, those children that need more support, and it's about supplemental instruction. And there's a lot of materials that have come out over time from so many different places that make various recommendations. So I've selected a few of the very strong ones. The first one is the CREATE brief. So when CREATE recommends to us that the services are in addition to Tier 1, close alignment to classroom instruction, and a talk about small group instruction. From IES, which we're going to look at a little bit more intensely in a moment, again, it's supplemental and it's small group. And their recommendation is that at Tier 2, the interventions are typically provided for 20 to 40 minutes, 4 to 5 times a week. So again, as extra instruction. Another group is within IES, and I pulled this one out particularly because I think it's an important theme. Their recommendation is, again, supplemental small group, but this is related to reading, but it's the building of foundational reading skills. And one of the things that we have found very, very strongly in those students that do need this extra support in mathematics as well as reading is the importance of foundational background skills and prior knowledge. So I bring this point up from the reading because it is ever so important. Other IES goes more deeply into their recommendations, and in fact, they rate them from low to very high. And I'll just point you just momentarily to look at the recommendations, at the strongest recommendations. And interestingly, the strongest recommendations are specific instructional recommendations, and this is really important. And as you read through it, and one theme that you're going to see all the way across is the importance of explicit and systematic instruction. And they give very specific recommendations as to having guided practice, having feedback, having frequent cumulative review, all kinds of things, again, that one can use technology to enhance and to make your teaching more effective, because there's so much out there that can help supplement what you're doing in the classroom. Other recommendations come from the well-respected RtI Action Network and Fuchs, and I think that's Fuchs plural there. But what we could see, again, without going into each one, is one more time, we're seeing the explicitness of instruction. We're seeing a conceptual foundational background knowledge. We see the importance of practice and motivation. And again, from the RtI network, the well-respected Johnson and Pesky, once again, we're seeing evidence-based instruction, small group, one more time, targeted instruction. Again, back to the IES, targeted for those that are missing at the classroom, that need some extra help at the classroom level. And we're talking again about targeting specific gaps. And that's, again, technology can really help us look at what are those particular gaps, as opposed to a wide range of the student just doesn't know or the student isn't getting it. And I'm just going to read to you this last point, which Johnson and Pesky say, and it's the reality for most schools is that they do not have the adequate resources to implement a comprehensive, I'm going to throw in the word and systematic, but a comprehensive intervention system as defined. Many schools struggle with the implementation because it just seems so overwhelming to meet the specifications of a well-designed Tier 2 system. And the RtI Action Network is not alone in this. IES and others also remind us of so many of the roadblocks to this implementation. For example, some teachers worry about aligning their Tier 2 intervention with the core program. And I think as we're taking even more, both from Texas perspective and a Common Core State Standards perspective, that worry, as I hear it, has intensified even further. Interventionists may not be experts in the underlying math content. So as we know, it takes a team to work on this. So it's not always the math teacher providing that intervention. And once again, if you have a reliable underlying core program that gets at the math, then you can be the teacher or facilitator of that knowledge and help student understand. Another one is that schools often tend to give the least experienced teachers the toughest to teach students. Not always the case, but again, another concern. The intervention material may not incorporate enough modeling, enough think-alouds, practices, cumulative review, and practice. And what we know very well is that digital or technology-based solutions allow for that, because you can practice in so many different ways. Many interventions don't provide enough visual representation. Again, a fundamental piece of making content comprehensible. And of course, today we're talking about mathematics and Tier 2 in particular. So again, through bringing in technology, you have as much access to visual representation as you can ever want or desire. Some teachers, again, believe that instruction in concrete manipulatives requires too much time, and it often does, because if you throw down a manipulative, virtual or real, without explaining it, without taking it step by step, students could be overwhelmed by those manipulatives. So how do you get that into the classroom, and how do you get to use these effectively? And I think my final point here is, or should I say IES's final point, is students within classes are often at very different levels. So as we all know very well, the beauty of technology is it helps us differentiate. So what is clear from all this is that teachers and students can certainly use a little bit of help. And I'm going to play a little clip so you can have a little relief from my voice for a moment. That said, the clip itself, the sound is not fantastic, so you're going to want to look at the closed captioning. So clearly, we all need help, and I'm suggesting technology instead of the police. So how can technology help? And I'm just pulling together really what we just saw, some of the biggest themes. And again, we're talking at Tier 2. So we're talking about supplemental. And these came up in each and every one in different ways and different wordings. Supplemental, systematic, we saw over and over small groups. The word targeted, consistent, explicit instruction. We saw about the use of data and reporting, integration of assessment and feedback loops, and practice, and plenty of examples. So we heard about visual representation, we heard about manipulatives, and so forth. So I'm going to start just showing some pictures about integrating assessment and instruction. In her introduction, Lindy had said that I am the creator of the Help Math program as well as the Math Learning Companion MLC. Most, but not all, of the examples that you're going to see here come from Help Math and MLC, but I want, and the aim of this is to think broader than just those two programs, but they exemplify a lot of what is best practice and what can be used at this level. So immediately, the beauty of a technology is using technology to pinpoint those gaps. And what we have here is a picture of Help Math, but just as easily you can turn to formative assessments such as, Acuity or NWEA, not necessary to necessarily look at Help Math. But here you're looking at Help Math, and you're looking at it behind the scenes. So we have a question here as to which ratios are equivalent. And as we build the program, as others do, but as we build the program, we're asking this question for a specific reason. It aligns to a specific skill that needs to be learned, and it aligns to a very specific standard. And behind the scenes, what we know is that this question is addressing one of the Help Math lessons called Numbers Make Sense on working with rational numbers. And we know that if the student gets this wrong, one, they're going to need more practice with Numbers Make Sense, but they're going to also need perhaps particular background practice. So as we build out the questions, we're already building out the foundations that can help the student reach those questions. So again, technology to pinpoint the gaps, precisely pinpoint these gaps. And so staying with Help Math, we are then able to match each student's specific need to the content that they need. So in other words, we can personalize their learning pathway. And this is just another way, and now we're looking at the Common Core side of it. We see the common, we're now looking at a Common Core example of something a student missed, and the background knowledge and the prescription that it takes for the student to get to grade level. So we're building custom curriculum. And as you know, many different interventions do the same. They look at the question, they're able to build. Help Math does it very particularly and very meticulously in this way. Not only, though, can you personalize, and again, using technology and helping a student at a Tier 2 level, not only can you personalize the content itself, but it's also possible to personalize the learning environment. So what I just talked about is on the left hand, when you're facing your screen, this diagnostic prescriptive intervention where you're pre-testing, you identify the knowledge and the skill gaps, and when you have an intervention like Help Math where you go straight from the diagnostic to prescriptive, it places you exactly where you need in your curriculum. Within Help Math, there's a model moving a student from independence all the way, a student from work and needing scaffold toward independence and mastery of that content. And we have particular loops that incorporate a lot of the things that you see in that RTI recommendations: explicit instruction, modeling, guided interactive practice, and feedback loops. But moreover, and again, it is possible to have different kinds of scaffolds as tools as scaffolds. So let's just say we have a student who has an IEP, who is a Spanish speaker. They may need not only, as we see down here, read-alouds, which is evidence-based strategy. They may also need Spanish translations if they are a Spanish speaker. On the other hand, a student that is not a Spanish speaker and has an IEP may find that the Spanish translation is too much distraction. There's too much information on a screen, so the screen can be modified, and by screen I mean the student's learning environment in which they're learning math. That can be removed so that the screen is cleaner. So it's really important, again, the wonderful part of technology is bringing in those scaffolds, not only scaffolding content to move from background knowledge up, but scaffolding using specific types of tools that can enable the student or accommodate the student toward learning. The other important bit that we heard over and over in the recommendation is the identification of small groups. So once again, we're looking at a Help Math report, but you'll find this, coming out of many other formative assessments. And in this case, what we're looking at here is we're looking at a specific question. In this case, it happens to be Pythagorean theorem, and we're looking to see, we know what the question is. Again, we know what standard it's meeting. We know what skill it has to deal with. And what you can't see so well because it's a little tiny here, but you've got numbers, and the numbers are 20% of students, or 40% of students, or 70% of students are missing this knowledge. So you can find, for example, the 20% of students within Help Math system. You can click on that 20% of students. Not only will it show you who those 20% of students are, it will also come up with their particular names. So from that information, instead of just dealing with a large group, you can have a smaller group that are dealing and need targeted knowledge in the same way. And the example that I'm showing you on screen is particular, but you can actually use all other kinds of or a number of different kinds of technologies to get at this. So for example, clickers are a wonderful tool, or any kind of student response system like clickers, which you can use in real time. So in other words, you may ask a question, the students respond in real time, and the teacher is immediately able to see, one, who got the answer right, and then even take it a step further, especially in this day where mathematical thinking and reasoning is becoming ever so much more important. You could then see the names of the students. You now have your smaller identified groups, and you can work with the particular student, start to push them back and ask good questions and about, why did they choose that answer, and so forth. So as I said, we're looking at a particular technology, but there are a number of technologies that are working in real time, and I encourage you, working at this Tier 2 level, to use these various technologies to pinpoint both the student, the small group, and the skill sets that students need. I'm going to breathe for 1 second and move on to the next part, which is really how do you deliver consistent and research-based instruction, and again, systematic instruction. And I'm going to begin this piece just quickly with a reminder again about the standards and how fantastic it is now that we're given this set of standards. And the picture you're looking at right now is, again, a background scene of Help Math and the Math Learning Companion, and every single page of the program is aligned to these standards, and we know exactly what detailed skill is being addressed here, what interactive manipulative practice would get at that skill, or set of practices would get at that skill, what kind of constructed response type question would fit with this kind of skill. And most programs these days are aligned to the standards. So once again, once you know the skill that the student may be having difficulty with, or students have gaps with, you're able to type in the skill or the standard itself in many programs, or even through the general search through Google, and pull up a variety of different resources that address that skill. And what I have up here is just pictures of what I'm calling blended instruction. And of course we talk about blended learning all the time, and immediately we think about blended learning as in using teachers and technology. I'm widening this definition just a little bit further, and I'm saying blending instruction, yes, fantastic through teachers and technology, and how can technology make you more effective at Tier 2. But I'm taking this even further, and I'm saying if you know that the student is having difficulty with a very specific skill, you can use a variety of different programs. You can use Khan Academy's videos, and then you can use interactive game from somewhere else and help program practice from something else, and you can combine them together. So not only can you blend the instruction using a classroom and online technology, you could blend the instruction using different technologies and different tools. And there are times when it might be better to have classroom. There might be times when it's better to use a tablet, and so forth. So again, using technology, we can think in many different ways, from using a single intervention to the ability to combine and to blend. I'm going to return to another, the second in our webinar series, because we're talking now about instruction. And Dr. Anita Archer gave a wonderful, again, I encourage you to look this up online and get a copy of this. She did a wonderful piece for us on explicit instruction, and in her words, and you're going to see all her words on this screen, explicit instruction is systematic, relentless, and engaging. And sometimes we don't think of systematic instruction, explicit instruction necessarily as engaging, but she shows us how and why it is. But again, when you're getting at Tier 2, it is really important that lessons are, or this is coming straight from Anita's presentation, that students, that it's organized and focused lessons, that we begin our lessons with a statement of goals. And I would take that even further, that our goals may be not only mathematics, but language as well. So we want to raise our students' academic vocabulary and language as well as their mathematics, but we begin with a statement of goal. We provide a review of pre-skills and knowledge that are necessary, and we've talked a lot about that. We provide step-by-step demonstration and instruction. Again, one of the things we heard from IES is that's one of the things that teachers find difficult sometimes, is breaking things down. Computer instruction often will do that for us. And that we provide guided and supported practice. We use clear and concise language, and we practice. And again, probably best to hear it in Anita's words from her own session. But I start with this because it's really important, this idea of explicit and systematic practice, and Dr. Archer just said it so wonderfully. So here's an example, again, from Help Math of explicit instruction, being systematic, using words and explanations and illustrations. What we're looking at here are two screens. We're looking at setting down the vocabulary to make it clear, so we're learning what a triangle is. At the same time, I learned from this particular lesson, because geometry is not my strength, I learned that triangles are actually stronger than squares and other shapes, and that's why the Eiffel Tower was built with triangles, and we see that being built, and it's actually really, it was actually quite interesting for me. But again, words, explanations, conceptual explanations, as Fuchs told us, and visualization. We also want to make sure that the foundational knowledge and skills are there, so that the student has something, so that it fires and they have something to hang things on. In this picture, you can see both explicit support of the vocabulary as well as the math as well as the tools surrounding it. Lots and lots of visual representation in everything we do, and again, we talked about that earlier, the importance and the ease with which you could bring that in from web-based programs. Another very important piece is modeling and guided practice using virtual manipulatives. And in Help Math and in Math Learning Companion, there are many. I want to reiterate one more time, again, with clear instructions, using Dr. Archer's words, step-by-step instructions, because often a program will be thrown at you and you're not exactly sure what to do. So another important piece of getting at Tier 2 through practice, which is fun and engaging, is using models, is playing with manipulatives, is to touch it and to do things. Another important piece, but before I talk, actually, we're going to hear from a student. This is actually a student who used the program with studying the Math Learning Companion as part of TCU's research program. So let's hear what she has to say.
I really like this program because normally when the teacher's up on the desk just talking and we have a book, I tend to space out a lot because I have really bad ADHD, so I get bored very easily. And but with this program, it's really exciting and it teaches you things that I really like to know about, and it teaches you really good information. And with all the pictures and the words that it's saying, you don't really tend to space out a lot. And even if you do, you can go back to the page again and you'll repeat it.
We're going to come back to him in a little bit. I'm going to just come back to the PowerPoint for now. So again, hearing from the students is always quite nice, and observing students is quite nice. But the idea behind that is you're hearing in her own words the importance of those visuals and getting at some of these techniques that we've been talking about in a little bit more of an academic way. And we're going to continue that just for a moment. Another very important piece of this is making sure that students have the problem-solving capabilities and that underlying structure, and that's another one of those recommendations, and another place where technology can really help. In this case, what we're looking at within the Help Math program is just a problem-solving technique and an idea of walking a student through different ways to solve a problem. What we are finding and what we're also studying right now through some grant funding from U.S. Department of Ed, OSEP, which is the Office of Special Ed Programming, we're beginning to study the mathematical thinking toward problem solving and toward communicating ideas. So what you can see in this corner here is the interactive notepad that we have, which is another way of expressing ideas and writing them down. There are different ways to optimize different technologies to do that and to get at problem-solving capabilities. Again, the importance of clear language, and often it's having a key terms dictionary. In the context of help in MLC, you can get the words both through a dictionary and through hyperlinks, but you can always access a dictionary outside of Help Math program. This one is within. And what's interesting is through many years of formative study, what we have learned is the importance of the read aloud. So you have the English translation. If you want, it can go away, but you can have the Spanish translation, and there's always a picture example, so there's plenty of different types of support. So clarity of language is very important at Tier 2. Again, the clarity of explanations. In here, we're showing, instead of just having a static formula, how did we derive that formula? And this is coming in step by step, and not only can you see it, you can also hear it. Plenty of engagement and motivation. These days what we're seeing is a lot of gaming coming through. This is a deep interactive virtual games added to clear instruction. Without it, it plays a role, and it plays a really important role, and it's playing an increasingly important role, and it's motivational. So it's very interesting, going back to my earlier talk about using different programs and bringing in different things to target the particular skills that students need. Another important piece is, here's that word again, systematic. But this time we're talking about not just feedback, but systematic corrective feedback. So what you can see on this screen here is that the feedback is specific. Not only did you get it wrong, but here is why you got it wrong. Think about it again. And if you need more help thinking about it, there's a need more help button thinking about it. But these feedback loops are very fundamental in this program. The next piece of this is, I'm going to once again be quiet, and we're going to return to our student and hear what he has to say.
It's actually, I like that it's actually at the level I would be at. Because with most programs that I've actually done, I've done many, but I've done a few, and they were just easy stuff. But this is actually the level that I'd be on. I find it challenging, and it actually helps me learn. Because this is the kind of stuff that I like to be learning. It's a lot better than just looking at a textbook and just listening. It gets your attention more.
It's not only verbal, which means it's not only talking to you, but it has pictures, and it's showing the math being done, which really works well for me. I'm not as good of a listener. I like to see things being done. So it really works out for me. And then it has a lot of useful information. And I like the little characters that it has. It gets your attention, because if you were, say you were in a mall and you saw a gray house or a gray store and a polka dotted store, which one will you go to?
I love that question. So would you go to the gray store or the polka dotted store? How fantastic. I hope we all continue to want to go to a polka dotted store. But in the meantime, I think the main point that I'd like to draw out of that little clip that I just showed is exactly what's on that screen. And that's believing that all students learn at high levels. And sadly, that's not always the case. And it's really interesting hearing it, not just, again, out of the mouth of academics saying how important it is, but here's a student saying, when I'm challenged at that level, I rise to that level and I appreciate it. And in fact, he goes on to speak about that some more, and that's quite important. So moving to the third major leg of this, what does technology get at? Data, which should say that on the screen. I'm going to add that for the final bit, but it's monitoring progress and using reports through the use of data. And once again, I'm going to show you just an example of a Help Math program where we see monitoring the progress of a student against a particular custom curriculum that they have and against a particular quiz that they took and where they went wrong. Most programs offer this today, some sense of review and a chance to revise and correct and see where things are not working. Another example, again, within a custom curriculum, it's an ability to drill down. we can monitor, we can see which tools the students are using. In this case, we can see what lessons have been completed, how they did on their final quiz, the amount of time that they spent on a program, and how much progress they have made through their curriculum. Now, what we're looking at here is progress within a custom curriculum, but of course, we can use formal progress monitoring tools such as AIMS, Web, such as a Math Learning Companion tool that will be coming out shortly. And in these kind of tools, we're not just monitoring progress against the custom curriculum, but we're also monitoring progress against the general ed curriculum. And this is really important to use such tools to to monitor students on a regular basis, to give quick, short probes to understand exactly where the student is at, and these exist. So again, what we want to do with technology is get that data in many ways that we can, and useful data. Just one more time, another example too is that we can drill down in the case of Help Math, for example, and we're looking now and we can see, okay, well actually I'm looking immediately at this and I can see that this student in fact has spent a lot of time on instructional sections, which is good, and I can see that they're passing. Sometimes you can see that the student has just sat on say a test-taking skills and hasn't really tried the instruction, and we get a lot of information out of that as well, because what we're learning is the way that the student is working and may not be working at the sections that they need to, and it gives us an opportunity to redirect. So so when I talk about data, there's in all the different learning management systems, this one, you know, I'm showing as a particular example, we could begin to drill down and get really useful information. I am going to really just close here with a thought of but another student, and we'll hear what she has to say before I conclude. So one more time. This time I have to fast forward a little bit, so please bear with me for a second.
You don't have to ask the teacher when you get to learn it better, and the people get to work at the same pace.
If you notice, by the way, we also have, I mean, if you think about that blended model one more time, it's you can have your student alone on a computer, you can have your student with a teacher sharing the earplugs and working together side by side, or you could have a teacher or a facilitator, as we see here, going around and working with the students. So it's not an either or, it's an enhancement.
I really like this program because it really catches my attention, because there's things that, there are characters that catch all kids' attention, and I have really bad dyslexia, dysgraphia, and ADHD. So I do space out quite a bit, and it's kind of hard for me to read. So if I accidentally go ahead when I'm not ready, I can go back and reread it. So it makes it to where I can learn a lot easier, and it's a lot more fun for me because it's a lot easier to learn when it's fun.
So in conclusion to the presentational part of this, I just wanted to reiterate that thoughtful integration of technology into a Tier 2 RTI can really help unlock the potential of all students. And thank you. And I think, Rena, I assume there are some questions that I'd be happy to take. Hello?
Technology. Hello?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you. Can you start that again?
Yes. How do I implement RtI with limited technology in the classroom?
That's an interesting question. Again, I think that I'm looking at the word thoughtful on the screen as I think about that. I think that there are many tools out there, and it's about using those tools wisely, really to get at pieces of data. So most teachers have some kind of a learning management system or a grade book or a learning plan, and using that to dig into it. So first off, one does not have to implement, right, using technology, but any piece of technology is going to help enhance. So whether it's a matter of going back and doing Google searches and pulling things off, or advocating for programs in your classroom, there are certainly ways to do this, whether it's through a small clicker technology, but it doesn't have to necessarily be comprehensive in only use of technology. It could be just as simple as going into your grade book and really using that data to monitor and be able to identify and target the problem areas for particular students and for small groups.
Okay, another question, Barbara. Your focus in this session is on Tier 2. How can it be used for Tier 1?
Yeah, that's also interesting, and I encourage you, by the way, to go to our previous session and our up-and-coming sessions to get more information. So so Dr. Kuchik talks a lot about implementation at all levels. So please, whoever asked that question, please have a look at that one. I would say really that it's not necessarily all that different. So once again, best practice teaching and instruction and the integration of assessment and instruction, going deep into that data, remains really important at Tier 1 as well. So what you would be looking at many of these techniques, using them with the whole class. So perhaps instead of using it as only supplemental 20 to 40 minutes as IES says, instruction, what you can be doing is implementing it within a whole class structure, parts of it. Again, they're all good aids to teaching, but on top of that, if you're continuing to use the data, then at that level you could begin to, in a certain way, screen or identify either, one more time, targeted students that may really need to be in Tier 2 and need some extra systematic instruction, or you may be able to target problems in the instruction that need harder and further work. So, so in other words, in the example I pulled up earlier, Pythagorean theorem. So we may find that a lot of students are struggling with that, and it's going to help identify. So I would say what you're trying to do then is very, very similar strategies when it comes to the instruction.
Okay, I have another one. Can students see and monitor their own progress through Help Math or the other program mentioned? Through Help Math and through the Math Learning Companion, which was the other, or MLC, I kept switching back and forth. The answer is yes. The student has a report card. So, so through this report card, the student is able to see what lessons they've completed, where they are in the middle of the lesson, how they did on their formative quizzes, how close they are toward mastery. They're able to do reviews. So, yes, they can. Great. Okay, so another one. Can you speak to how these types of scaffolds or supports might be appropriate, not just in math-based intervention, but also in other supplemental academic materials across subjects? Whoa. I could speak. I can speak to that, but I can't necessarily speak as an expert. So if anyone wants to jump in or talk about this later and write back, I'd be most welcome to share it with the group. I mean, the answer is it's supportive and it's scaffolds. So, for example, in any subject matter, including literacy and in reading, if you have a key terms dictionary that is that highlights academic vocabulary or academic words, and better still if it's hyperlinked and you can get it right. And we all know this from just working with our own Kindles, right? I know that as I'm reading these days, I actually click on the links and on my Kindle to get definitions. So we know a tool such as that works so beautifully, right? Immediately across curriculum, because there are going to be words that stand in people's way, as one example. Then for those speakers that are not native or first language English speakers, translations are also very important. So again, doesn't matter the subject matter, to have access to translation is fantastic. So I guess as I speak about any of these tools, the ability to take the word mathematical thinking and put the word scientific thinking or put the word analysis of literature in, it doesn't matter. The ability to have access to an interactive notepad where you can write your ideas and share those ideas with your teacher can only be an aid to anything that one does. We're building right this moment a peer-to-peer collaborative network to learn about, again, how that support works. There's no reason why that support should just work within mathematics. So actually, as I think about it, it's an excellent question, and yes, these tools stand both integrated into a program, which is wonderful. So in Help Math or MLC, you can track the exact page and the exact section and the exact concept that the student may be struggling with, but even without tracking that, it's an aid to the student if it stands outside the program.
Great. I don't have any other questions, Barbara, but to wrap up and some final points, do you have anything that we can give people to take away, some main bullet points?
Well, I mean, I think that the main bullet point is pretty much where I began. It is not easy to implement RtI full stop. Tier 2 can be particularly daunting for all the reasons that we talked about in the very beginning. So I think that to implement it, really my takeaway is to say that I think that it aids in so many ways, and just to repeat those ways one more time, it's really through the integration of assessment and instruction, targeting and pinpointed, so integrating assessment and instruction, keep being able to do that formative assessment and constantly monitoring the teacher, the students, and the students within small groups. The next main point would be really delivering consistent and systematic and motivational instruction. And once again, through technology, you can get evidence-based and research-based solutions, so that consistency, systematic, and explicit teaching. And then the final point is that importance of using data. Technology allows you to use data to monitor progress, to use formal progress monitoring systems, but to monitor progress in different ways and to use reports. So really technology allows you to look at that data. And I would say those are my three main sections, which I'd like to leave it with.
Thank you for viewing this presentation of the ANSERS Institute webinar series on response to intervention.